Welcome to Money Moves for Latinas podcast. Iris, I'm so excited you're here. I absolutely love your Instagram. You drop so many gems and you tell it how it is. I love it. It's super sassy and like super Gen Z. I love it. To start things off, I'm really impressed how well you're managing your money in your 20s. Your mission is to make money easy to understand, but I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the community, to the listeners. What inspired you to start this mission and how has this journey been like?
Yeah, so my name's Iris. I'm 26. I'm from Chicago. I started my content creation journey in about 2021 and I started on TikTok. I've always been interested in personal finance and financial literacy just because at home, that's just not something that I was taught, you know? Like my parents were immigrants. I'm Filipino. So when they came here, of course, like personal finance, the stock market wasn't the first thing on their minds. So that was something that I had to teach myself. And once I started creating content online, I noticed that there was a gap in especially women in finance, but especially women of color, which is what really inspired me to. And also, I feel like something that I am good at is I'm very good at making complex subjects just easier to understand. So I would watch videos and immediately I'd be like, oh, there's an easier way to explain that, you know? So that's kind of how I got my start, was just seeing there was a gap in the market of people that look like me in this space, as well as making finance just easier to understand.
I love that. I'm obsessed with their channel. Like, absolutely love it. You make it super easy for someone that is just learning, getting their feet wet in investing or learning how to how you say little terms like that tend to trip people up or they have no idea about that. So I love that. But Iris, let's pretend that I'm really, really bad with money. I have no savings, no emergency fund, and I have a few credit cards maxed out. What would be the easiest ways for me to start improving my financial situation?
Well, first things first would definitely to be get an emergency fund set up. I say it all the time. An emergency fund is easily the most important money milestone to achieve, and everyone should always have one set in place. Experts suggest having a fully funded emergency fund as 3 to 6 months of expenses, but if you are someone that's starting completely from zero, any amount, but especially like $1,000 is just a good place to start, especially because say you are a person with like a bit of debt, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you don't have any savings and then now you have to get even deeper into debt. So definitely like the first things to square off is get some savings set aside. And then when it comes to debt, there are like different methods to pay it off, whether that be like the snowball method or the avalanche method. I personally don't care which one anyone chooses as long as they, get it out as soon as they can.
I love that. You just have to, a lot that stops a lot of Latinas, like a lot of people. It's like, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed. I'm so deep. I have like 10 credit cards. I have 3, 4, 5, whatever. It's out of control, basically. Mm-hmm. And they just like don't even want to face the numbers. They don't want to sit down and create a plan, and sometimes that's just what you have to do. Just kind of face it head on, choose a strategy, either one that's snowball, and then just go for it.
And another thing would be is to stop using your credit cards altogether and just go on an all cash diet. So what I see a lot of people doing when they're already deep in debt is they're still using their credit cards. When I recommend just going on an all cash diet, so whether that just be just using your debit card or even like taking out like physical cash and only restricting yourself to that amount of money, because you don't want your balance to grow any larger than what you already have.
I love that idea that if you're like that, if you're in a little bit starting off, like, you're not in a good situation financially, that's a great one to just kind of pause the credit card until you knock some of them off and you can understand, like pay them off, like the balance off first before racking up more debt. So I love that because it's hard. It trips up a lot of people up too as well. So Iris, you're in your 20s. What are some things that you're doing now in your 20s to get ahead financially?
So some things that I'm doing right now would be just putting away from retirement. I feel like a lot of people think, especially in their 20s or like, even like early 30s, they think retirement is so far ahead when, in reality, it comes along like a lot quicker than you think. And if you're not putting aside money as early as you possibly can, you're kind of screwing yourself over in the future. So that's definitely the first thing, is just getting ahead of putting away for retirement. The next thing would be just increasing my financial literacy overall. Especially in America, we're not taught personal finance in school. I mean, I definitely wasn't. Were you?
No, I was not. This is why I made
No.
a lot of mistakes in my 20s. So
Yeah.
when I hit 29, like a little bit of my background, like when I hit 29, I was like, whoa, what's going on? Like it was just like, yeah, didn't know anything about 401ks, didn't know anything about having an emergency fund. I didn't even know what that was. It was just like my mom is an immigrant. She didn't speak the language, so it's just like we were just raised kind of like, woof, get out of high school and start working, and then just like you don't have to worry about money. I guess it was just never taught, or like, but there was no like once you learn the money rules and all that, then you kind of start getting ahead. But there was no money rules at all. It was just like fend for yourself, do what you can to get ahead.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, like, especially like in the home, especially coming from like an immigrant background, I feel like most of us were just taught to survive, not really thrive, which is why a lot of the times like financial literacy isn't really taught in the household. But like even in the school system. So that's what the one thing that I just knew that would set me ahead, especially in my 20s, is just to learn as much as I could about money. And the way I started learning about money was honestly through YouTube. That's when the rabbit hole started for me. I just got into the personal finance YouTube, started watching a bunch of videos, and then I, gradually, naturally started to gravitate towards books and podcasts and just, learning as much information as I possibly could.
And what YouTube channels or podcasts or books should we be listening to get better with our finances?
The one book that I recommend, like if you ever only want to read one book about money, I recommend I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. I feel like that's a great book just to learn. If you don't like reading, I think that one book is just enough to be your bread and butter. Have you read that book?
Yes, I have it. I read it a couple of years ago, and I was like, "Oh my god!" It was like a mirror. Like I don't even have a high yield savings account. I don't even have it. I mean, it was just like that's how I started learning about money.
It was
like,
that book?
Oh my gosh, yeah, it was that book. Yeah,
Yeah,
a couple of years
I think
ago.
that's just the one book I recommend. If you only want to read one book about money, that's the one.
I agree. I love it. He says it how it is, and he even gives you guidance and and bank accounts to use and high yields. I love that. So he really guides you. If you have no financial literacy, like I didn't have any of that. It's a luxury. Like I did interview my last Latina that I interviewed. She married not into money, but she married an American family, and then obviously like her sister-in-law had already been setting up her kids through investments and all these things, and she's like, oh my gosh, my parents never set me up, or my parents don't even know what an IRA is. They were just barely here, migrants trying to like get ahead, and while the migrants are trying to just survive, here's the American families that have been passed down this knowledge and know how the money rules are to go ahead and get ahead. So that's like, this is why I love doing the podcast, so we can explain it and educate, and once you learn about the rules, you can definitely start getting ahead.
Yeah, for sure.
And I also saw in your reels that you're living below your means, maxing out your Roth IRA, you're avoiding debt, and you also mentioned that you've kept your lifestyle relatively low and that you're aggressively investing. How are you doing all these things?
Yeah, so the main thing for me is just to stay away from lifestyle inflation. So as my income increases, I don't upgrade my lifestyle much. Like my gym membership is really cheap. It's like $30 a month. I drive a really old car. My car is like a 2006. And yeah, my clothes, I still wear clothes that I've had since high school. Like even my phone, I have like an iPhone like 13 Pro Max. Like I just don't upgrade my lifestyle as my income increases. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that you can do to get ahead is just to keep your lifestyle the same as much as you can.
I agree. So basically go on a cash diet. Like if you have a spending problem, or if you have a credit card problem, or a couple of things maxed out, is to first stop using credit card, use only cash, or switch to debit card. And then also, like you said, stop improving or stop living large, or like upgrading every few years, or like, upgrading the car or upgrading a phone or anything like that. So I love that. Let me tell you, I am in my 30s and I have friends, Iris, that are just turning 40 this year, and they have never invested a penny in their lives. They have no idea what a Roth IRA is. So for anyone listening, Iris, can you explain why they should open a Roth IRA and start investing?
Oh, yeah. I think anyone should open a Roth IRA, and it doesn't matter how old you are when you start. Obviously, the younger that you start, the better, because simply your money has more time to grow. But even if you are someone who's maybe like late 30s or 40s, it's still not late to start. I think everyone should have one simply because, it's an individual retirement account and anyone can open it. You don't need an employer to open it. You don't need anything. You just need yourself. And I also like that it is very flexible as well. So where with my previous employer, our like 403Bs, I couldn't change what it was invested in. It was only what they, offered. Whereas a Roth IRA, you kind of have full control over what you're investing in.
Oh, yeah.
So
Highly, highly recommend that. And like I mentioned, I was actually talking to a friend. She turned 40 in January, like a month ago. And yeah, she had no idea what a Roth IRA is. And she's like, oh yeah, investing? Oh, you mean like the 3% that I do at work through my paycheck and a 401k? And I was like, well, there are several types, but yeah, you at least you have that offer. She's like, well, they don't give me a company match, so like I don't even invest in there. You know what I mean? So this is a lot of Latinas are sadly in jobs where they don't have benefits. They don't even have an employer match. They're turning 40 or they're late 30s. What would be some steps they could definitely do on their own to kind of like start, investing?
Oh yeah, I mean, my biggest tip, what I tell even all of my family members and my friends to even start investing is just to use a Roth IRA, simply because it has great tax advantages, because all the gains inside of your Roth are tax free. So when you get hit retirement age, everything in there, you could pull that out. That's all yours. So that's my biggest thing. A lot of people get very nervous when you hear the term investing, because they think you have to pick individual stocks when, you don't have to. You can buy a bunch in one go with like an index fund or an ETF. So that's probably my, biggest tip for starting, is just use a tax advantage account, index funds.
Yeah, I agree. And another thing that I've noticed is that most people our age, like 30s or 20s, like you said, they think that retirement is so far away. They don't even prioritize it or like kind of understand why they should not just do the match. Barely a lot of Latinas my age are just doing like the up to the match, like the 6% at their 401k or their 403b or like through work. They just do the bare minimum. Why is that like it's not a red flag, at least they're investing, but like why isn't that enough though? Like when I was investing, like when I was still working as a nurse in the hospital, we had like matches, and it was like I had like 3% match. So I was investing like 6%, but like at the end of the calendar year, when you look at your paycheck, when you look at the overall, just investing 3% or 6% from your paycheck is usually like maybe $2,000 in a year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like you don't max anything out, which is great though. For someone not knowing anything, to at least set aside something. But I don't think $2,000 that you invest every single year is really gonna get you far in retirement. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh no, I feel like maybe like a few decades ago that could have done something, but I feel like in the timeline that we're living in now, I definitely think the most aggressive, the better. But also I feel like culturally, like, and socially, our thoughts on retirement have just changed in general. And I think a lot of us are more leaning towards retiring earlier than 65. So that's why I think, everyone should try to just invest as aggressively as they can. That way, when you hit an age, you can become almost work optional.
I love that. How could someone become work optional? Like early in their 40s is early, 30s is early, 50s, even retiring in your 50s is still early. It'll be a decade, 15 years earlier than normal retirement.
Yeah, the average, yeah. It's definitely just a formula of living below your means, increasing your income as much as you possibly can, and investing pretty much doing that, rinse, repeat until you hit, your golden standard number that you want to retire off of.
I love it. I love it. And you also, Iris, you also mentioned in social media that you're kind of like in your rich girl era and that you have some non-negotiables. And I wrote down the non-negotiables you said. The first one you said you pay yourself first, you max out your Roth IRA, you pay your credit card statements in full, and you never like put anything on a credit card that you don't already have the money for. And you also use a high yield savings account. Why should more Latinas learn about like having non-negotiables with their money?
I think having non-negotiables just gives you almost like a rule book, a playbook just to live by. So that kind of helps me make sure that all of my behaviors and everything that I'm doing is in check. So, for example, like never putting anything that I don't have the money on, on my card. That's a non-negotiable for me. That's why every time before I even make a purchase, I have to think to myself, do I even have the money to put this on a credit card? Or, when it comes to, it's a non-negotiable to max out my Roth IRA. That has me thinking every single month, how much have I invested? How much more do I need to invest to max it out? It just kind of gives you a standard that you hold yourself accountable to.
I love that. I love that. So yeah, everyone listening should create their own non-negotiables. If your non-negotiable this year might look like, hey, I'm gonna put X amount every paycheck towards my emergency fund. Like if I'm just starting out from scratch, I would start there. Like, hey, every paycheck that I get, 10% is non-negotiable, is going towards a high yield savings account. Until I hit X amount, maybe until I hit $5,000 or $3,000 or $1,000. And then once I hit that goal, then I'm like, okay, I'm ready to tackle the debt off. And like you said, don't overthink it. Just pick your strategy and just go for it full force. And then just automate it. What do you think about automating things? Like, I absolutely love doing that.
Yeah, for me personally, I automate everything. That way, everything just becomes very seamless. I just like to automate it, especially for my credit cards, because once you hit a point, you probably understand this. I have like so many credit cards that there's no way that I could, really remember every single due date. So I have it all automated to where it immediately just pays off the statement balances in full before the due date.
That's a great idea. I love that. Yeah, especially if you don't want to be hit with interest.
Yeah.
Forgetful, and since you already said you make purchases very intentional, and you will have the money sit in your checking account. So yeah, I love that. Yeah, that way you don't have to remember if you paid it off or not. So that's wonderful. I also noticed in your Instagram reel that I love that you don't keep any money in your checking account and everything else gets invested immediately. You only keep enough in your checking account for bills and for like a smaller buffer. But why should more Latinas put their money to work instead of just sitting it in their checking account and doing nothing?
Yeah, because if you just leave your money sitting in an account that's earning you, nothing, you're pretty much losing money thanks to inflation. If your money is not working for you, it is decreasing in value just because of inflation, which is why it's really important to put it into places where it'll grow. Something like...
I agree 100%. So tell us a little bit about inflation. Like what happens every year? We've seen it now with the eggs. Like the eggs used to be like, I don't know, like it's just gone so crazy as of the recording of this show. Eggs are $6 at Aldi, which is the cheapest play you can find it. So yeah, tell me a little bit about inflation. What should listeners learn about it, and why should we care about inflation?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think that putting their money into stocks or just assets in general is risky. And yes, when you do that, there is risk. However, the main reason that you should do it is to combat inflation. Because if you're just leaving your money sitting inside of like a traditional savings account, you're losing value, as opposed to if you could put it somewhere in like, an S&P 500 index fund that's going to earn you like, on average, from the top of my head, like 7 to 10% per year. So it's better than just leaving it. Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely want to beat inflation because inflation happens every year. One thing costs, like $2 this year, and then next year is just going to be $6, or the gas could, it started off at $2.50, now it's at $3.50. You know what I mean? It's just like inflation, like you mentioned, it just helps us stay ahead. The money earns more than what the what the money is worth this year. For must-have accounts, like bank accounts, I saw that you have like a checking account, high yield, retirement, brokerage. Like, tell us, what are the four must bank accounts to have, or like how do you organize your money? If you want to walk us through like what you do and how you automate things.
Oh yeah, that's so funny that you asked that. I actually just posted that video today. Yeah, so I would say how I personally handle all of my finances is I have one checking account for my personal, my business is different, but for my personal accounts, I have a checking account and that kind of functions as just like the hub. So my, income gets paid into here, my bills get sent out from here, and then this is the account that sends all the other money out to go to work. So from here, as my income comes in, I pay my bills. What I have left goes into investments. And then I have my retirement accounts. Those, I just try to max those out as much as I can throughout the year. Once those are maxed out, then whatever I have left over goes into a standard brokerage account. Now, the reason that people typically do this is because the retirement accounts have tax advantages, whereas the brokerage account does not. So it's kind of more in your best interest to max those out first and then go into whatever leftover goes into the brokerage account. And
So
then,
what kind
yeah.
of retirement accounts do we need to start maxing out, or our goal? Because like the first time when I first started investing, I remember I was in so much debt, Iris. I couldn't even afford to max anything out. I think I was lucky enough, or like I was like, for the grace of God, enough that I even invested $1,200. I remember, like I opened a Roth IRA. I'm like, this is, I'm gonna start investing, and put $50 once a month. That's all I could afford to, because I was like paying off aggressively. I was doing the debt snowball back, when I started in 2021. So, yeah, and then when a year went by, as I was paying off my debt, I did clear all that off. But as the year went by, it was like $1,200 maybe I invested. But then once I cleared off my debt and I became debt free, then the next year, the second year around, then I was like, oh my gosh, this is the first time I'm able to max out my Roth IRA, and because I had free more money, to do that.
Yeah.
So what's the order, or like what should we already talked about having an emergency fund, then having like, a strategy to pay off debt, and then once you have that cleared off, what are we maxing out?
Oh, yeah. Try to max out just your retirement accounts in general. So, that could look like, for example, like your Roth IRA, just like the standard. I think at the time we're filming this, it's like 7,000 per year. But then also a lot of people, especially like in this age bracket, they also have like a 401k that they can, try and max as well as with their employer. So that would be the accounts to max.
So step number one would be to try to max out the Roth IRA, which is a lot easier to max it out. And don't feel, also for those of you guys listening, don't beat yourself up if you can't quite max it out. Your first time or the first year you get intentional with your money, or your first time you start like dipping your toes into investing. If you just, even if you just start investing, $50 a month, $20 a month, at the end of the year, that'll turn into like $500, or so. But it'll then, by the time you free up more money, or like you said, increase your income, then you can start, what to do, in what order you need to be maxing things out. So I absolutely love that.
Yeah, exactly. Don't feel bad if you can't max out, the 7,000 per year. Even if you could put in just as much as you can, starting is key.
Oh yeah, I agree. Like opening it, and just going ahead and buying
Yeah.
it first. Deciding what to invest in, because that's another thing. A lot of Latinas, like they've bought, like also was interviewing last week that I interviewed one of the girls. She's like, oh my gosh, yes, I went into this personal rabbit hole, and I would get tidbits of pieces of advice. And she's like, I already knew that I needed to open a Roth IRA. So she was all excited. She went to Fidelity, obviously online, opened up her Roth IRA, and then that was it. She transferred some money in it, and then she's like, oh, I'm investing. And then until the year later, she didn't realize
Yeah.
she had to pick her investments. So that's a common mistake. Like a lot of Latinas who are not grown up with, like we don't have like a sister-in-law or a mother-in-law to be like, oh, let me just show you. We don't have any of that. So how would you walk someone through that?
Oh, yeah. That's actually just a common mistake in general, is a lot of people think that the Roth IRA is the investment when it's really just the account. So as soon as you open it up, that's a good starting point. You just opened up the account. After that, you have to go ahead and pick your investments. Your Roth IRA, it's just an investment account. You pretty much have free range to buy whatever asset that you feel comfortable with. a good starting place for, anyone's independent research is just to look into index funds and ETFs. They're very easy and they give you exposure to thousands of stocks.
Do you have any particular ETFs that you swear by or that you like from Fidelity or Vanguard?
Yeah, I try not to say specific ticker symbols just because I don't want to give financial advice, but a good starting point for anyone to look into is just a regular total US stock market index fund and an S&P 500 index fund. That's a good basic index funds to look into.
That's better than not doing anything at all, right? So, I want everybody listening to at least get their, their feet wet, their toes dipped into investing and kind of open that Roth IRA if you still haven't done that. Even if you're in debt, just to kind of set your foundation so that whenever you do pay off your debt and you become credit card debt free or pay off the high interest debt, then you can, what you're doing, what investments you're going to be buying and automating things. So I love that. That way it's out of sight, out of mind. You're, doing that every single month. I also saw your rant on Instagram about your buy now, pay later. You said that if you hear the words Klarna, Affirm, Afterpay, you automatically assume the person is so bad with money. I agree with you 100%. And why should Latinas avoid that trap of buy now, pay later?
I just think that, you're putting yourself in a position where you're risking your credit score as well as fees. Typically these services are mainly used for material items, so you're really going to risk your credit score and fees for an Amazon haul or something, you know what I mean? That's just the way I see it. And I also just think it's just bad financial practice in general to just pretty much just put things into debt,
I agree. I try to stay away from financing anything. I feel like the American way, it's to finance everything. Finance your phone, finance your car payment, finance your education, college, finance it all. And then you're you can't keep up with bills at the end of the month because what happens when you finance everything? Oh, I want the latest iPhone. Oh, I want the latest car. Oh, I want the latest whatever. You don't have the money to pay for it in cash. You don't have the I don't know how much the iPhone is, $1,200 in cash. Then you have to finance it because you don't have that money. And if you swipe a credit card, you'll get charged interest. So it's what are your thoughts of financing?
I think for the most part, it's something to just, I don't want to say it's inherently bad, but I feel like for the most part, it's used for just unnecessary items. So me personally too, I just try to stay away from it as well. I try my best just to pay cash for things, mainly because I just don't like debt. More of a psychological thing. Even if it's 0%, psychologically, I just can't stand the payment.
Right. Yes, exactly. Financing your way through life is you're adding more payments a month.
Yeah.
The more you add is okay, now you gotta pay the mortgage or the rent, then you gotta pay your groceries, your $6 eggs, all these other things, plus the car payment, plus the new phone, plus all these things. So yeah, I totally agree with you. And then you don't have a return on that money that you spent, That's the whole point of investing, because you get a return on your money. So if I put $100 in, I get money back. I get 10% from that. Or if I can only invest $50 a month, I expect to receive a return on my investment by the end of the year. So that's just that's a mindset shift that we have to learn how to make as well, because a lot of Latinas are not taught that. We're always taught about I want it and I want it now and I'm gonna get it, if it's financing or another way, or if it's swiping another credit card or whatever. So this is why we end up in a lot of credit card debt. So I love that, thinking if you can't pay for it in cash, then you can't afford it. Basically. Yeah, that's a good mindset shift. Alrighty, what are some money mistakes, Iris, that you see a lot of 20-year-olds make with money?
The biggest money mistake that I think gets a lot of people in their 20s especially is just simply lifestyle inflation. I think lifestyle inflation is just that thing that keeps you stuck in the hamster wheel of living paycheck to paycheck, and it allows you just not to really move up.
I agree.
So,
And what are some things that creep in, like as lifestyle inflation? Like, what do you think are those things that slightly, kind of like,
Yeah, well, I think, especially like post grad, when you're, starting to make just a little bit of money, you see your peers driving new cars, they're upgrading to like the luxury apartments and things like that. And, as humans, we just want to also almost fit in and try to showcase like, hey, I'm doing well because like I'm carrying this purse, or I'm driving this car, and we're just kind of trying to impress people that we don't even like for validation.
oh yeah,
But just lifestyle inflation, I think, is the absolute biggest wealth killer for people in their 20s.
oh I agree, yes.
And it's also, I feel like, something that's hard to get out of as you begin to age, because then you kind of get used to just always upgrading your standard of living. Like you're almost never content.
Yeah, it's like a losing battle, or like a never
Yeah.
ending battle that you're always like, okay, well, she got the latest thing. Oh, well, let me get. Oh, she went to Cancun for a week and a half. Okay, let me. You know what I mean? It's just like you're always. Yeah, and this hamster wheel. You talked about the hamster wheel. I see a lot of 20, 30-year-olds in the hamster wheel. How do you get off the hamster wheel? If you, like I said, if you're bad with money, if you've always been taught to finance your way through life, how do you get off the living paycheck to paycheck cycle?
Well, first things first is, again, I always say this, the most important money milestone is emergency fund, because you don't want to get into more debt just because you can't, handle a small emergency. Next is just to get rid of all the unnecessary debts. So, any like credit card payments, and just stop adding to the balance. Again, go on an all cash diet if you have to, just so that you don't add to that credit card balance, and, stop spending money that you don't have.
I love it. Another important thing that you mentioned in your reels is that you're doing in your 20s, you're focusing on increasing your income. How are you doing that?
Yeah, so one of the ways that I'm focusing on increasing my income is pretty much through starting a business. And the business that I primarily do is just content creation. And that's kind of something that I honestly didn't intend to make money when I first started to do it, but then it started to just naturally become profitable. And with this, I'm also just trying to increase my skill set in other areas and looking for different ways that I can monetize, and just overall just keep increasing my income.
I love that. And what do
Yeah.
you do with the extra income?
Oh, girl, you already know. Increasing
You
my
know,
savings
I
and
love it.
increasing my investments always.
Awesome. So you're
But
paying. Go ahead.
but not everyone has to start content creation if they are looking to increase their income. That's just the way that I've done it. I also do recommend even like going back to school or getting certifications, any way that you can personally improve your income.
Okay. Awesome. I love that. Yes. I saw your Instagram that you're making almost six figures in social media. Did you?
Yeah.
You are like, how did it start off though? Back in 20, you've been doing this a couple of years now, so it's not like anybody who's starting tomorrow is going to be making six figures. I understand you gotta, work your way up to it, but congrats.
Thank
Six
you.
figures
Thank
is
you.
amazing.
Yeah,
Like
thank
through
you.
content creation, like I love that.
Yeah, it's a
How did you?
dream.
How did you start getting into the six figure? Like that's a huge thing. Like a lot of Latinas, we don't make six figures. I'm pretty sure you know that.
I mean, well, I started in 2021, and from there it was I started monetizing honestly pretty early on. I kind of got lucky starting when I started, because that was just when it was really easy to grow on TikTok. So it was pretty easy for me to start monetizing through there. And I pretty much just got started monetizing through like sponsorships and brand deals and affiliate marketing. And that's just pretty much how I got my start. And as my audience grew, naturally too, like the brand deals get bigger, the affiliates get larger. And that's kind of just how it kept snowballing from there.
That's awesome. That is exciting. So you're
Yeah.
kind of doing UGC or affiliate, kind of everything a little bit, like to
Yeah, I
monetize.
do a little bit of everything. For 2024, my biggest streams of income were UGC and sponsored content.
Nice. I love
Yeah.
it. That's amazing. And how can any Latina who wants to look to increase their income or started as a side hustle like you did in 2021, how could they get their feet wet into content creation? Is there certain courses they need to buy or?
Yeah, I think courses are great. I personally didn't start using a course, but there are some very good ones out there. If you are looking to start, my biggest recommendation would just be to pick a niche that's authentic to you. For me, I could talk about personal finance and, the stock market for hours. I could talk to the wall about it. But, for other people, that could be fitness or makeup, just anything that is authentic to you and that you could talk about for hours daily. And then, some tips for growing is just to honestly just be consistent with it. It's kind of like the gym. You have to show up every day to see the results.
So you're posting every day, right, Iris?
Yeah, I'm trying my best to post every day. I got sick recently, so I took a few days off. But yeah, for the most part, I post every day.
That's awesome. Having some great growth, in all your socials. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So a lot of Latinas have this idea of relying on men for money. Not sure if in the Philippines, but hear me out. Or just waiting until someone bails them out, or waiting until they get married to then learn about money. Why should they learn about how money works now and not wait until someone risky like Prince Charming comes along or anything like that?
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh. It's funny that you mentioned that because I also have some friends that are kind of in the same boat, and I'm like, stop trying to fall in love and start trying to get rich. Like,
Yeah.
it's craziness. I think, though, everyone should learn about money only because, money is freedom, and having that freedom allows you to get out of situations that may be, unsafe or that you're unhappy in without having to rely on somebody else. And also, too, sometimes men don't know everything.
That's right. Hey, that's
You
right.
know?
Yes.
Like you
Yeah,
can't, like he can act, super confident, like he knows what he's talking about, but he can be doing things completely wrong.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's like you mentioned, Iris, a lot of us didn't grow up learning anything about money. We're not, it's just something that you've had to, like you said, you came from immigrant parents, so you've had to figure it out on your own because obviously your parents couldn't pass the knowledge down to you or kind of like help you, start off earlier or whatnot. You know what I mean? How some parents like start their kids when they're born or whatnot. But yeah, I love that. I love that you. So girls, if you're listening, don't expect no Prince Charming.
No,
To
stop
bail you
trying
out.
to fall in love. Start trying to get rich.
Yes. So most of the Latinas, they work hard. They go above and beyond. And however, they only get like 25-cent raises a year. Even though they work overtime, they never miss a day of work. Why should they learn how to make money online like you? Or monetize
Oh,
their skills?
oh yeah, just because, the thing is, I just feel like with relying on one source of income, you are honestly just putting yourself at risk because at any point in time, your employer can just say, that's it, pack your things, we don't need you anymore. And then, now you're just stuck in this situation where there's no more money coming in. And I also just like the idea of kind of being in control of how much money that you get to make. And you're just not tied down to like what a boss is allowed to give you.
Yeah, because once you clock in and you clock out, that there's a limit to how many hours there are in a day and how much money you can
Yeah.
make an hour.
Yeah,
And if you're only going to be
exactly.
getting and if you're only going to be getting these 25-cent raises, I mean, that's not even keeping up with the eggs.
No, it's not keeping up with the eggs. You're right. You're right.
Like, you know what I mean? If you could give me a $6 raise, then it's like I could.
Yes, exactly. I agree with that 100%.
So this is why it's so important for the girls, for a lot of Latinas listening, to go ahead and start thinking of ways to make money outside of their 9 to 5, basically.
Yeah, also just time freedom as well. I think a lot of us too, we get burnt out at the day job, going 40 hours, making somebody else's dreams happen. So it's just always a good idea to have like a side hustle or, a small business or something that you can just have to yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Um, let's see. Okay. Oh, what are the 5 money rules to learn before you're 30?
5 money rules to learn before you're 30. Let's see. I feel like I made a video about this recently, but now I'm drawing a blank.
Like in my 20s, I feel like my biggest mistake I made in my 20s was just relying on one source of income. Like I didn't even know that you could make more money or that you could actually make more money outside of my 9 to 5 more than in my 9 to 5. You know what I mean? Like these are things that I didn't learn until I turned 30 and I had earned it. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Did I just, what? I was underpaid. It wasn't until like I actually, lived it and made money online. Because a lot of people, I feel like a lot of content creators are hushy-hush about what they earn or how they earn their money. And I
Yeah.
understand they don't want to be judged, or, they don't want to be like, oh, you can make money on, because it's not overnight, you work your way to it. But yeah, that was one of my biggest mistakes or regrets for my 20s, was just relying on my 9 to 5, or my nursing income, which wasn't enough. And that's why I racked up a lot of debt in my 20s, because it wasn't
Hmm.
enough to keep up with inflation, to do anything, to travel. I was in that hamster wheel for a long time. And now that, I was to a point that I was like, I'm about to turn 30. Like, I can't live like this in my
Yeah.
30s. I put my foot down and I started learning a lot of personal finance. And that's when I found the book, Remy Sadie. And I read his book, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so inspiring. Like how he organizes, like what you should be doing, follow his rungs and all that. It's just like, I never knew that.
Yeah. So I think maybe like the first money rule to learn before 30 is definitely always have an emergency fund. That is just the most important money milestone. And I would argue the first one that you should aim to achieve. I think a lot of people slip into debt, not necessarily because they have poor spending habits. That's definitely one cause. But I think a lot of people, we also slip into debt because they don't have the cash to even cover an emergency. So then they are forced to go into debt. So just having an emergency fund is just definitely the stepping stone to being in a better position financially. The second money rule to learn before 30 would definitely be to live below your means. I think this is especially important for people in their 20s because when you start to inflate your lifestyle, you are choosing material items over getting ahead financially. Especially if you didn't come from wealth, you have to make those sacrifices in order to create it from scratch. And one of those sacrifices being, especially in your early 20s, is just holding back on the luxuries while you can aggressively invest and increase your savings.
Yeah, and that's the thing. A lot of us, my immigrants, and born, who were just born here with parents that didn't know, couldn't help us set up ourselves, or like learn better money habits or money rules or whatnot. Yeah, we're starting from scratch. A lot of us are
Yeah.
starting with a lot of debt, student loans. A lot of people in my generation, they're dealing with student loans, they're dealing with car loans, they're dealing with a lot of debt. Plus, they're still like in their hamster wheel. So it's like, sometimes it just feels like I just want to give up. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's just never gonna happen. So, what would you tell to someone like turning 30, or like they should start? What should be the first step they should do besides after starting? No.
That emergency fund. The third one, this is going to be a little bit more unserious, but if you borrow money, pay them back. I see a lot of people just, borrow money and have no intentions of paying people back. And I think that is just so wrong, and a money rule that you should definitely learn before 30.
Oh yeah, totally agree. Like if you go out with your friends, get a round of drinks, or you're paying, if you're splitting a check or you're eating out, in the table, go ahead and Venmo her or go ahead and Venmo him the money. Don't wait until people harass you until they get their money back. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
100%. Definitely. I think that one's just a bit more unserious, but I live by that. If you borrow money, you pay somebody back.
Oh yeah.
Next one would definitely be to not rely on one source of income. Again, I think with, like we were saying, with everything that's happening, like it's just almost unsafe to rely on one source of income because at any point your employer can just say, hey, we don't need you anymore. And now you're kind of stuck and screwed.
That's right, yeah. So like learn high income skills, like becoming a
Yeah.
content creator. And these are things that you can totally do for free. Like when you started off, it didn't cost any money to
Nope.
start, creating content. And as you start, you get better.
Yeah, you learn as you go. You don't have to be perfect to start something. You learn as you go. For me, that looked like getting into content creation. But, for some other people, that could be like buying a business or even investing in real estate. Just any way that you can find another source of income to help supplement what you already have is great.
Yeah, I love that. And what's your last money rule?
Yeah, my last one would definitely be to continually learn about money.
I like that one.
Yeah, I think with money and personal finance in general, this is just a topic where you could always learn something new. And I think we shouldn't just stop it at, okay, I figured out how to invest. Okay, I figured out how to save money and just stop the learning there. I think we should always be actively trying to learn about money. So like for me, for example, like I would say I'm financially literate, but I still actively listen to podcasts. I still actively read books because I also think just even learning about how other people handle their finances is still very valuable.
Oh yeah, I love that. And whatever that's why it's called personal finance, because what may work for you may not work for me or may not work for
Right.
someone else. So that's why I love that you continuously educate and see what works. And I actually believe a lot in automation, because once you set it and you forget it, kind of like how you have your credit cards, like the balance already set, like, hey, pay that off. um it's not accruing interest. So I love that your focus really in your 20s, you're just focusing on maximizing your return on your money. Basically, you're focusing on earning money from your money instead of like paying for interest. So I feel like that's a lot of mistake a lot of Latinas make. They pay for the interest rates instead of like learning to earn it. What's the
Oh,
difference
yeah.
there? Does that make sense? Yeah, what's the
Yeah.
difference?
I mean, definitely, I think it just comes down to just not knowing any better, you know? So, like, if you don't know necessarily like, how interest works, you're going to be the one that ends up having to pay it, you know? So, I think, just the first step is just learning about how money works and how not to be a victim.
And yeah, I especially in the Latina community, like I have a friend that just moved here from Venezuela. She's 28 years old, doesn't know anything about money, doesn't know how the rules of money work here in the US. So
Right.
she wants to get a car, obviously finance, which I was so against. And I told her, I was like, I'm gonna go translate for you, but I don't like this. Let's see what the interest rate is, right? She doesn't speak English, so of course we go through the paperwork, and the loan officer is like, well, the best thing we can give you is like a 14.99 car loan. And I was just like, let's get out of here before I punch his face. Because then she's like, oh yeah, I need the car. She was all ready to sign up. And I'm like, wait a minute. We don't understand what money is happening. Like, hold on a minute. I was like, I'll explain once we get home, and he's like, okay, well, and he was kind of like it's a lot to learn though. If you're just new in the country, it's a lot to learn the rules and regulations of money. Because of her credit score, she's brand new here, about a year
Yeah.
or so her credit score is like in the 600 ish, and of course she would fall under the 14.99. If your credit score is in the 750, then you would be at 1099, which is not great. And if you're above 750, or I don't remember exactly, you would get the 4.99 promo that they were offering. And I was like, that's where we need to be, at the 4.99, like that's even better. And I was kind of explaining it, but she didn't understand what the difference was in a car loan that was financed at 4.99 than a 14.99 car loan. Does that make sense? So that's something
Yeah.
very simple. But I was just like, no, we're not signing. We're leaving right now. We are
Oh,
leaving.
yeah.
We're gonna focus on your credit score.
Yeah, you're a good friend.
Yeah, but a lot of them don't know any better. Latinas, they just go ahead and sign, and they get the car loan.
Yeah, they're just, they're like, okay, I'll just figure it out later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a lot. So this is why it's so important, like you mentioned, before you turn 30, to understand what the interest rates are and how the credit score plays a role in
Yeah.
what you get as an interest rate. So I love that.
Yeah. I mean, like, even after 30, I don't think it's too late. I just think, like, for me and my demographic, again, like, like, the earlier you could start, the better, which is why I'm screaming every day, like, start now, just because the earlier you can start, the better.
Oh yeah, and investing, it wasn't like, obviously, she's new in the country, she has no idea about that, and I was like, you know
Yeah.
what, let's just learn what credit score is, you know
Yeah,
what I
right.
mean, and then we will eventually get to like investing, because that would be so complicated.
Yeah, right. Baby
But
steps. Baby
yeah,
steps.
but yeah, that's where the Latina community is right now, and a lot of people are just they sign and don't understand what they're signing. They're financing their way through life. But I love that you swear by that money rule, pay for everything in cash and don't finance your way through life. It's just the safest way. If you, especially, you're building generational wealth from scratch. Like, that's where we are.
Yeah.
We have nothing handed. It's just we came into this country like, what?
Yeah.
Just
Have to
like,
figure it out.
yeah. Yeah, and some of us came at 28, like she came in at 28, some of us came
Yeah.
earlier, and it's just like navigating through this waters and financial. So I love that you encourage the listeners to just learn it, and there's no shame in learning because we're not taught any of this. We're not taught what a 14.99 interest rate is versus a 4.99, and what you can earn in the stock market. So, yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, I feel like a lot of people just get turned away from learning about money because overall it just sounds like a foreign language. But, from like my advice to learning about money is just to keep forcing yourself to consume the content, keep forcing yourself to keep trying because yes, it sounds like a foreign language, but it's kind of like learning, another language, from scratch. Like you have to be around the speakers to start picking up words. You start learning naturally. And that's kind of where I was when I first started. Like I was like 16. Like there's no way I knew like what a stock was, but I kept forcing myself to learn about it and eventually after watching like 100 videos it clicked.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because there's definitely rules to the game.
Yeah.
And sadly, Iris, like I'm telling you, if you don't know what those rules are, then you get burned. Either you pay for what did we say? You pay for it or you earn it. Like the what is it called? I think there's a famous quote. I forget. I'm trying to like remember
Yeah.
what the famous quote is. Is like, compound interest. Like if you learn about it, you earn it. Or those who understand the compound interest, they earn it. But those who
Mm-hmm.
don't, they pay for it. So the
Yep.
way you pay for compound interest is through those credit cards. Actually, I know you're super against the buy now, pay later, and I am too because I've helped some of my students get out of debt, and I have seen those high interest rates and those Klarna and those their interest rates is like 32%, 31.99, and it's just like I mean, what?
It's
I would
crazy.
never finance something at 31.99 like in qué cabeza, like oh my goodness, you
It's
know.
crazy. And it's almost always too for, non-essential purchases, which is what really gets me, like we're putting Ugg boots
Yeah.
on
At
Klarna.
31.99, you can't even make
Yeah.
that in the stock market, you know what I mean?
No.
So it's
No.
like, okay, we need to educate a lot of the Latinas or a lot of the immigrant community about how, the compound interest works. It can work for you or it can work against you. In this case, with the Klarna and the Afterpay, the interest rates works against you if it's at 31.99.
Yeah.
It's just you're paying that high for something that only costs $10 or 15 or whatever the case is. You ended up paying 55 instead of that $20 that you could have like paid it for it in cash. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're
So,
so right.
so this is why I just love the money, the real money talk. So I thank you so much, Iris, for coming to the show. You dropped so many gems, and where can everybody find you to follow along your journey?
Yeah, you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, all just Iris Ayala.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Wasn't this conversation amazing? Iris shares so many great things she's doing now with her money in her 20s so that she becomes work optional later in life. She gets it. She's aggressively investing. She makes her money work hard for her instead of working hard for her money. So she's on a mission to retire early and to have financial freedom and options late to live life on her own terms. If you've made it this far in the episode, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a review, and share it with a friend who needs to hear this. Remember, getting good with money is possible. You just need the right guidance and the right mindset. Until next time, keep making those money moves.